Okay, hello and welcome to week 9, endings and transitions in groups. I apologize if the sound quality seems to have gone down. My headset speaker has decided to break. Also apologize for any ambient noise you might hear, as I just have to use the microphone on my computer, and so I'm sorry that it sounds a little tinny. Hopefully the subtitles will help with that. The optional closed captionings that you can turn on. Okay, so the agenda today is to explore dynamics and skills associated with bringing the helping process to a close and helping the group members in making appropriate transitions as appropriate. Also, we're going to examine the danger of this phase becoming a moratorium on work in which both group members and the group leader participate in what we call an illusion of work. And we'll talk more about that. Also, there aren't any assigned readings. I know on the syllabus it says to be announced. However, looking at the guts and needs from the weekend, you just use the extra time for finishing up your group project manual, and you won't have any additional readings. Just this lecture and just a couple other activities online. No assigned reading. Hope that helps. So the ending phase of group practice. This is where the group members need to decide whether or not they're going to deal with the most difficult issues as they approach the end of the working relationship. The emotional dynamics between the group leader and the members are also heightened in this phase as they prepare to move away from each other. And so a lot of difficult feelings can come up for both the leader and the members that they may or may not want to engage with. And remember, our natural tendency is to avoid what's unpleasant. And so when a separation, a close, a termination starts to come up and become really apparent, like, oh, the end is coming, it can be really hard to focus on continued work. It can be really hard to stay engaged. And as we prepare to move away from each other, that just can be hard. So the ending phase holds tremendous potential for work, yet ironically, this phase and stage can be the least effective. And so what often happens is it's not at all uncommon for a group member in or a client in individual or group therapy or counseling. It's not unusual for them to just skip the last meeting. And I've had that happen many times, and that's actually a phase of like, ooh, this was really hard, and maybe they weren't ready. And then to reflect on, okay, this is important to remember that we need to talk about it on an ongoing basis to remind people, like, okay, we have 3 sessions left, okay, we have 2 left, and to check in, like, how is that feeling, and making space to be able to process some of the difficult feelings that can come up. You might also have clients that come in late, clients and or members that exhibit some apathy. They become less engaged. They don't really talk about feelings. They might act out or even regress back to earlier stages in the group. They might go back to storming and get a bit confrontational. And you see this with adults as well as children. And so it's good to be aware of these common things that might happen in your group as you move towards the end phase. The ending sessions can be the most difficult because the norm, our societal norm, is to deny feelings associated with separation because it's painful. And we also want to appear like we can handle it. We're okay. Everything's fine. That's the message that our society tells us to exhibit. Like, oh, just put a smile on and keep doing it. You're fine. Don't worry. Shove it under the rug. And so this can make it really hard in a therapeutic setting to engage people and to really recognize, okay, what are those difficult feelings that are coming up? DeLucia Wack from 2006 suggests that it's really important to address endings and the factors that may cause leaders to ignore the importance of this phase. So it's not only the members that might avoid the difficult feelings that can come up with endings, but the leaders might as well. So some groups are so brief, like really short time-limited groups, it can be really difficult to consider using a whole session to process endings when you only have so much time to cover the content. So like skills and lessons, thinking about like parenting groups or social skills for kids or something. Also, termination brings up grief and loss issues. It's totally normal to feel and go through stages of grief and loss when a therapeutic relationship or a group comes to an end. And sometimes the leaders may not want to experience emotions that go along with this stage, so they avoid it. Chen and Ryback from 2004 talked about the termination stage, was what they called this phase. They say it's ridden with a theme of loss and grief. A lot of feelings are triggered by the ending of a therapeutic relationship, and endings can be filled with sadness. Although the entire group experience may feel like a small life lived with others who have become significant in one's life, its ending may feel like a big loss. So even if it might be a short time in a person's life that they were a part of this group, it can be very intense work. And so people get very connected and very invested into the life of the group. So when it ends, it can feel really big. When sensing the ending approaching, some members start to feel a sense of separation anxiety. Corey and Corey from 2006 talk about the final phase in the life of a group as the time for members to consolidate their learning and develop strategies for being able to transfer what they learned in the group to their daily lives. So I think I've mentioned this a few times throughout the class, but that ending stage being really important to facilitate transfer of skills and knowledge because they won't have the group anymore. And part of your job as a group leader or facilitator is to help group members apply what they've learned in the group to their settings outside of the group. So at this time, members need to be able to express that the group experience, what the group experience has meant to them, and to state where they want to go from here. Endings can be difficult because members realize that time is limited in their group, and members face the reality of termination. And they also need to learn how to say goodbye in a group setting, and that's something they may not have ever done before. And so they may not know what they're doing and try to avoid what's uncomfortable. So if the group is truly therapeutic, the members will be able to extend their learning outside, even though they will feel a sense of sadness and loss. And so the group leader's job is to help facilitate that process. So process that, validate and normalize that feeling of sadness and loss, but then also be able to facilitate conversations about applying learning. Schwartz, 1971, said that in the final phase of work, the group leader's skills are needed to help the members use the leader and each other to deal with the problem of moving from one experience to the other. Leader and members may have unstated feelings at this stage and phase, so it's time to clear the air. You want clear communication from a place of thoughtfulness. You also want to talk about misconceptions. And it's also really important to clear up negative feelings. So as the leader, really bringing some of those unstated feelings up to the forefront to really be able to talk about these things, to provide some psychoeducation around what common reactions and feelings and experiences towards the end of the group might be so that you can normalize it and validate it for your group members. And some of these things might be sadness, grief, loss, but they can also be guilt. Guilt for feeling as though they didn't make the most of their time. And that can be felt on the part of the group members as well as the group leaders. Maybe thoughts of feelings around like, oh, I could have been more organized, I could have done more. And that's totally normal to feel towards the end of the group and to be aware of as, okay, this is a part of this ending process that I'm feeling that way. Even harder than the negative feelings are the positive ones. Being able to accept praise and acknowledge that the group work was really beneficial to others, that can be hard, and it's super important to do. And then also cultural barriers come into play. When we think about how different cultures can accept praise or talk about praise, and how different cultures acknowledge hard work and taking responsibility for that hard work and for progress made needs to be balanced with cultural understandings of modesty and humility. So just being aware of that is important. It's also important to recognize that anxiety and sadness about group endings can happen very early on in the process of a group. For some groups, it starts at the very beginning. Members may already be anxious about starting a group and making connections that they know will end. And a group leader needs to strategize with the group members on the ending phase or stage, however you want to call it, early on. So it's important to be checking in about it and saving some time for processing this and deciding, okay, what's coming up for you all? How do we want to manage that? How do we want to continue forward with the group members on an ongoing basis? So stages of the ending process. There's denial, and that's where members ignore the imminent end of the group. There's indirect and direct expressions of anger. That's often focused on the group leader. And that's because the members might start to feel abandoned as the group ends, and they might then regress to earlier stages of the group. They might start to regress in the form of like, oh no, we're not ready to end. I still have problems and I still need help. I still need you, so we can't end the group. And that's kind of how regression comes into play towards the ending phase. There can also be mourning, apathy, and a general tone of sadness in the group. And then trying it on for size, which is when the members operate independently of the group leader or spend time talking about new groups and new leaders. And then there's the farewell syndrome, and that's when group members avoid any negative feelings or feedback, and they only focus on the positives. And so in groups, when all you're getting is positive feedback, that's probably an indication that the farewell syndrome is happening, because no group is always great. There's no perfect group experience, and so there's always going to be constructive feedback that can be given. And good to be aware of as the group leader. If it's all positive, then the farewell syndrome might be coming into play. So some strategies for the group leader during this phase. Bring the ending to the group's attention early. Stages should be identified and talked about. Bring personal recollections and feelings to the group. So share your own experiences of how you're feeling as the group's coming to an end. That can help normalize talking about it. Also discuss both positive and negative reactions to the group ending and just to the group experience in general. Help the members be specific as they evaluate their work together. Encourage both positive and negative feedback. And encourage expression and acceptance of different views and experiences in relation to endings. Because there's not just one experience of a group coming to an end. There's many, and making sure that they are all validated in the group. And then when you think about transitions into either other groups or into community settings, you want to help transition the members to a new leader as that's appropriate, if that applies. Help members identify what they learned and how they will use it, and again, being specific is important. Identify how the members might find the same type of support in their life situations, and specificity is important there too. Connections between content of the group and process of the ending. So it's important to be aware that depending on the content, the type of group that you're working with, there might be some very unique and specific issues that come up around endings that'll be related and that depend on the type of group that you have. And then doorknob therapy is the word I was looking for over the course of the weekend for clients that wait until the very last minute, like you're at the door saying goodbye and they drop a emotional bomb on you. And that's called doorknob therapy. And so that not only happens in the context of like each individual session, but it could also happen uh, over the whole course of the group experience, where like right in the last couple sessions, things start to get very intense, and maybe one client discloses something um, that they'd been dealing with but hadn't disclosed until the very end in the group. And so to be aware that that might also happen, and think through how you might want to manage and process when that happens in the group. Last slide, ethical issues related to endings. So basically you want to be aware that there are different cultural understandings of endings. It can be seen as an interruption in a relationship, like, oh, well, this is goodbye. I won't see you as my leader anymore, and maybe we won't talk for a while. But maybe then it'll be fine if I reach out to you and email you and give you updates on my life. That might happen. It might also be seen as a permanent separation, like a permanent severing of a relationship. And it depends on cultural understandings and interpretations of endings. And so it's important to have conversations about those. Be aware of the differences that might be existing in the group, and communicate clear expectations of what happens next with the group. And that's all I have for you this week. There's a couple other things on Obiverse for you to, I think there's a forum and a class activity. Maybe one other thing, maybe not. I can't remember off the top of my head. But try to keep it short for you all, and hope that you're able to use the extra time without any assigned readings to work on your group manual.